Welcome to What CEOs Talk About. Do you wonder what CEOs talk about behind closed doors? How they bring their vision to reality? How do they overcome and succeed through adversity? We share that and so much more with each episode. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, this is Martin Hunter, your host of the What CEOs Talk About show, where we talk about translating strategies into frontline operations. Past guests have been Dominic Rubino of the Profit Tool Belt and Cabinet Making Profit System, Jeff Livingston of Norvera Visuals, Sebastian Nault of Black Tie Property Services. This episode is brought to you by urgeo. Urgeo is Latin for to urge, a strong desire to drive change, stimulate thought, incite feeling, encourage action. Urgeo provides a fractional COO services that moves your company through growing pains so that you can flourish and profit. Mandy, you had a vision, right? We're going to talk about that a little bit. You were a visionary. You said, okay, enough with this. I have a vision. I want to complete that vision. So translating that strategy into frontline operations is taking a lot of effort and still taking a lot of effort, right?
Yes.
Fabulous. So the visionary CEOs that I talk to, usually they love to have that integrator that takes the ideas across the front line. So if you want that integrator, call Urgeo, urgeo.ca, or email them at info@urgeo.ca. Urgeo has worked with a multitude of companies in SaaS, CPG, mining, transportation, and all from startups to all the way up to multinational corporations. Today's guest. Oh, I have to do a shout out first. Matt Newman, SVP of Sales at Alpha Foods, this explosive growth company, is the link between Mandy and I. He's a good guy. Mandy can tell you more about Matt. But without further ado, Mandy McKaskle. McKaskle is, I have a very good friend. His name is McKaskle too. He spells it a different way. But Mandy has had various sales roles within the past 20 years, luxury hotels, hospitality. She worked in DC, where she took care of diplomats. I'm sure that's going to be a lot of stories attached to that. She is now the CEO of Creosote for the past 2 years, and she does full service luxury travel. Did I say that right?
You did not.
I did not. All right, let me have it. How do you spell it, and what does it stand for?
Well, it's Creosote Journeys, and trust me, Marketing 101 tells you pick a name that's easy to pronounce, easy to spell, and it's neither of those. And actually, when I was in the process of creating my brand, I kept coming back to it because ultimately it was all about this connection to a place and feeling authentic. So I thought, you know what? We didn't know what Uber was or lived, 10 years ago. So I couldn't Creosote on the
I feel your pain. I call my company Urgeo, which is Latin to urge, right? And then everybody says Urgeo. I said, do you say geography or geography, right? So Mandy, what is near and dear to your heart? What is the topic of our podcast today? What did you want to tell the folks?
So it's just about staying focused and staying positive and moving forward and despite things being thrown at you daily by the minute, that want to sideline you, and just, some things that have been useful to me that I maybe wish I had known, and, that I continue to use and develop on each day. So.
Okay. So at the center of this conversation today will be maintaining positive focus. So we will try. No, we don't say try. We will give you as many lessons as we can from our conversation to maintain positive focus. So please tell me, title, what does it mean? Where are you? Why did you pick that one? Because it's not easy to say. And what does it mean to you?
Yeah. So Creosote is the iteration of, for my company, is actually a native plant to the desert Southwest. And it's what's responsible for the smell of desert rain. And the creosote bush has all sorts of very unique properties, that make it a pretty special plant. Obviously, anything in the desert, you have to basically kill or be killed, survive, fight for
It's
survival,
true.
scarcity of resources, utilize what you can when you have it, so it's all of these things that definitely translate to being a small business owner. But for me, it was after living and working in Washington, D.C. for many years, which was an incredible experience, but also was one that was very difficult personally. And when I came back to Arizona, it was one of those things that right away I immediately felt connected and grounded to this place because of, and that was one of the things that every time I smelt it, it just brought about a sense of calm, a sense of peace, and just immediately like, I feel like I'm in the right place. And translating that into my business, I've been fortunate to be in the travel industry for over 20 years. It's something that's definitely changed my life, definitely saved my life in many different ways. But I always worked for a single hotel brand, a single destination, and I always wanted more. But being a travel advisor it's definitely not for everybody. And there's a 3 to 5 year, under normal circumstances, global pandemic notwithstanding, to really build a business if you're starting from nothing, which I was. So wasn't ever really in a place, certainly living in DC financially, to kind of take that leap of faith. And then came to Tucson, was in a place where I was kind of at a career crossroads, if you will. Took that time to what I call pause, reflect, pivot, and grow. And it was kind of like, okay, taking stock of where I'd come in the last 20 years, what I liked about being in the travel industry. I loved meeting people from all over the world. I loved the teacher that travel is. I loved, just the humanity that it brings and all of these things. And how can I incorporate this more? I know I want to continue in travel, but maybe it's not down hotels. Maybe it's being able to open it up to more people in different ways. And then tying it into Creosote Journeys, where it's all about travel as a way to connect, ultimately with yourself, with your family and your friends, and definitely with the country or the culture that you're experiencing. So that's
So
kind of how it's all tied together.
you said saved your life.
It did. Well, and I picked Creosote Journeys because I had a brother who passed away when I was younger and his name was Jeremy. So I wanted something that in my name that kind of, was homage to him and just that he's always part of me as well. So
Oh, and so what saved your life in the travel? Just bringing it back, or like what's the experience that you said that really saved your life?
I mean, there's a few different examples that I think of, and for me, it's a personal thing. For everybody, it's different. But the first time that I can say travel saved my life was actually when I was 16 years old. My brother had just passed away. He committed suicide, unfortunately.
Sorry.
And I had a kind of an informal exchange with a family who their daughter from Mexico had come and lived with us. I grew up in Arizona, so
Mhm.
obviously we border Mexico. A daughter of a family friend, had come and lived with us in the town that I grew up in, Arizona. And then the next year we had made plans for myself to go live with her family, just get kind of an informal thing. And then kind of tagging on to this, had grown up with what I consider like a bilingual home. We had a house in Mexico, so we spent a lot of time growing up in a beach town called Puerto Penasco. So very much like the Mexican culture, being in, speaking the language, all of that was
Mhm.
very much part of me. So even from a young age, it was just travel was kind of in my DNA, if you will. I had
Mhm.
parents that were, it was very important too. But anyway, so when I was 16, I went and lived in Hermosillo, Mexico with this family. And it was, 2 months after my brother had passed away. And still to this day, I'm pretty amazed that my parents, essentially lost two children in the span of such a
I'm
short
sorry.
period.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's one of those things when you're a kid, you don't know what you know. Like I
Yeah.
look back at it now and I certainly could not have done anything like that, completely uprooting my whole existence, moving to a place that, I had grown up going to Mexico. I had grown up taking Spanish, that, but until you're immersed in a culture, it's really like when you're going to learn it. And definitely being
Mhm.
16 years old, all of these things. But it just taught me, like, from a very young age, just that adaptability, flexibility, what it feels like to be completely out of your comfort zone, be completely uncomfortable, but then using that as a place to grow from and a place of strength. Like if you can withstand that period of uncomfortableness, it's only going to expand on, the positive that comes from it.
Because you leave, you got nothing, right? You had what, a backpack or a bag, and
Basically, I
yeah.
mean, it was, and, so that's like the first time that I think of, man, I was so fortunate to have that experience. It's something that it definitely still resonates with me,
Hmm.
to this day. And I don't know how different life would have been, if I hadn't have had that experience.
Self-reliance. And back then, so for the listeners, back then, I'm assuming there was no cell phones. There's no, hey, where am I on my GPS? Hey, Google, can you translate this into Spanish? No, 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 no. It was Lonely Planet, and you had the little book, and
No.
right.
And I'm, curly red hair, very white skin, like definitely not Hispanic. So it was a life lesson that I'm very grateful for.
Very Celtic descent.
Yes.
And my good friend Shane McKaskle is as red as you are. So I think, if we bring it back to focus, bringing your focus and bringing positivity, like you haven't lost that. So that has been your focus
Hmm.
your entire life. You started traveling, and then you made a lifelong decision of working in that business.
Yeah.
So maintaining positive focus through and throughout started at a young age. So you want to call that entrepreneurial spirit of taking everything. And I mean, what do entrepreneurs do? They often take bigger risks than others, right? When you're an employee, you don't have that risk. When you take a vision and you translate that vision, I mean, it's a higher risk that a lot of people of employees don't want to take. So what were you doing well? So let's take about that pivoting role. What was the spark that said, I'm done? I'm done with this job. I'm going to run my own business. Screw this. What was that? Can you recall that moment?
I mean, definitely can recall. It was just one of those things that was not, I was in a position that just was not a good fit for me or the company. And we parted ways. And I had, I had the, gift of time where I didn't have to jump right into another position right away,
Hmm.
because Tucson obviously has a much better cost of living than
Hmm.
Washington, D.C. And that's where I really, again, just took stock of what do I love about, where I've been able to come in my career, what's most important to me about moving forward, and where do I go from here. And definitely some of it was probably a little healthy dose of realism, and that I didn't want to leave Tucson. I
Okay.
love Tucson. And so in my industry at the time, there's not a lot of luxury hotels in this area, and
Hmm.
certainly the ones that were here weren't hiring for my position or whatever, as that goes. So I said, I've thought about doing this for a while, but I wasn't ever in a place where I could kind of take that leap of faith, get off the treadmill of financial stability for a few years and really build something that I believed in. I had, definitely a very supportive partner who, he's an engineer, but, have is also a huge champion of just whatever I need to do to make myself happy. So I think that's what
Good.
any of us could ask for, is just having somebody that they don't necessarily understand, but they just support you
Oh,
unconditionally. And
that's really good from an engineer. Risk management, right? Oh, okay. Causality. Oh, no, 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 no. It goes down the list, and he says, "What's the mitigation for this?" Right?
well, he's a Navy veteran, so he loves to travel.
Oh,
So I think a little bit of it is he does love to travel. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. My father was in the Navy. I was in the Army for a long time, so I lived in Japan for close to a year because I did the same thing. I had enough after 9/11. I was in charge of operations, safety, and security for the Nuclear Emergency Preparedness and Response Division of Health Canada. So same thing, had life issues and first marriage, and I was like, okay, enough. Took everything and moved to Japan, and it was discovering and living is better than visiting.
yeah, yeah.
You know,
I think I saw you were in Yokohama.
yeah, I was, I
Yeah, I
was.
visited there. We were there earlier this year. Actually, when the pandemic hit, I was in Japan.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah.
Um, And so when we move there, the creating those personal relationship, because I want to bring it back to that, because you said it, and I think we need to emphasize a little bit more on that. Creating positive relationships just makes you a better person. So going to somewhere or working in a different company where you connect with people. Um, so I'll give a little. I'll take the mic for a little bit. The security guards at where I used to work, I used to get Canadian. I'm Canadian, right? So I used to get Canadian maple little cookies, and I'd give them out to these security guys, and they would always want to talk English to me, and I'd miss my train frequently. And so this one day, I go to show up to work with my little, briefcase, and I line up, and there's 50 Westerners and about 25 Japanese people waiting in line because you have to go through the tourniquet. And so this little Japanese guy looks through the window, puts his gloves on, stops everything. And he says to everybody behind the row, he says, "Gomendasai," really loud, like, "Excuse me, gomendasai." And the Japanese adopt the, immediate bow. The Westerners was kind of looking, and he says, "Sumimasen, Hunter sama." So sama is higher than san. "Dozo, please come." So because I had spent that little bit of time with them speaking English, sharing my culture with them, I had gained their trust and therefore elevated in standing. So I'm sure that you've lived the same thing in Mexico, where you've traveled, you've connected with people, and that has made you a better person, but also help you understand the nature of how to do business with people as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's all about perspective. I think if I could, you know, one word that kind of, definitely explains a lot of is just we all have our own perspective, and what seems normal to you is very abnormal to somebody else. And that's
Hmm.
again where travel to me is just that. I always say travel is my teacher and I'm a student for life. If you have a healthy curiosity, if you want to continually, expand your horizons, I think
Wow.
travel is a great way to do that. Being again put in an uncomfortable situation where you don't know even something as simple as where's the grocery store or how to ask for basic directions, or all of these things that we take for granted when we're in our little bubble,
Hmm.
and that's where travel just definitely expands on that.
And how do you think, what would be a lesson here? How do people how can you apply those lessons in the business world? How does a CEO of a busy company, 500 plus people, use that? What's your take? How does he use the ability to take small things for granted?
Right. Well, I mean, I think to backtrack a little bit, in the sales world, it's always to me about you have to sell something that you ultimately believe in some form or
Hmm.
fashion, because then what comes across is authenticity, and people can smell
The
inauthentic.
BS, yeah, that's right.
Definitely. So, for me, it was always on the hotel side. Again, my perspective. I always worked for companies that either had incredible properties or in great locations,
Hmm.
because to me, it was very exciting to me. I was interested in that, and then that enthusiasm definitely came across to my clients. And so, even when you're dealing with a stressful situation, maybe a client that checks in and the room isn't what they wanted, or all these myriad of things that can happen in a hotel, it kind of just, at least if you know that at the end of the day that you're believing in whatever product you're selling, and that we all make mistakes, and you're just, to me, it's, you got to be honest about it and then move through it. If you aren't honest about it, that's when sometimes other issues pop up.
Hmm.
But I think as far as your question goes, and how do you maintain positivity, um, again, in my own personal experience, I just look back to when I try to get ahead of myself, when I try to do too much, when I try to
Hmm.
take off too big of a piece, that's when I tend to get a little anxiety. And so it's always just reeling back to one thing, one small thing. And what's for me, what's the easiest way to kind of dial down that anxiety is okay, what can I control in this situation? What am I
Mm,
impacting? What's positive about this? Like, not the negative. Okay, this is horrible. This is horrible. And then it's that self-manifesting kind of, if you have that mentality, then that's what you're going to bring. It's like, okay, well, what happened in this situation? What was my role in it? Clearly, I can't control what another person's reactions are, or what, if I don't have the product, if I don't have the, all of these operational things, if you will. But just kind of breaking it down to very small, what was good about this?
mhm.
What can I learn from this?
I mean, there are so many lessons that can be applied. Um, when I mean, maintain positive focus. So maintain consistency. I don't know for the listeners and people who are watching, what Mandy is saying is start with questioning yourself, right? So there's a lesson. There's a lesson right there. What am I doing? What can I control? I think that's the biggest component that somebody, regardless if you're a CEO or not, what can I control? And you can't necessarily influence people, but you can take the right actions to be able to, in those small moments, if we come full circle, to ask the question, how are you today? Knowing people by their name, understanding the small things in life, that consistency of approach. Positive. I think you've nailed it, but we'll talk a little bit more. How have you stayed positive through COVID? Because I mean, no jets, no hotels, tests. You started this 2 years ago, so that takes you October 2018, somewhere around there. I think if I can
Yep.
remember correctly.
Yep.
So you've got yourself a year under the belt, right? October 2019. You say, okay, we're doing good, and then the holiday season comes in, and then blam. So how did you maintain positive?
Well, it's not been easy. And I think, again, speaking to the authenticity, I've definitely had my dark days. I've definitely had moments, as I was kind of explaining to you earlier, globally tourism supports 1 in 10 jobs. So it's definitely, this pandemic has affected everybody,
Mm-hmm.
but certainly travel and tourism has been pretty hard hit. And then, just dealing with government shutdowns, countries, places you can't travel to. So not only dealing with trying to make sure that you could get, in my situation was getting clients safely out of countries, but also having to cancel trips that I'd been working on, essentially when I started, and just dealing with all of that. And then being relatively new with Creosote Journeys, I I had clients, but I don't have like a strong developed book of business. So it was just, how do
Mm-hmm.
I maintain that forward momentum of trying to do business development when you can't, necessarily meet with people? A lot of, success that I had here in this area was doing presentations at some of the 55 plus luxury retirement home
Mm-hmm.
communities, just getting in front of that baby boomer crowd that is traveling.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously all that was taken away. So I think, in the first couple months, it was certainly just dealing with kind of the operational needs of my business, of
Mm-hmm.
dealing with cancellations, getting all of that squared away for clients. And then there was no shortage of educational opportunities, so I took the opportunity to get certifications that I hadn't had time to do before, or learn about destinations that, I wanted to expand my knowledge upon, or learn about products. I mean, all of these, there was no shortage. And it got to a point too, where I think I overdid it. And it was just, I was in this mindset of like, I have to stay busy. I'm so used to like creating my own business. I have to stay busy 8, 10 hours a day, like in front of my computer. What can I do? And so I was scheduling webinar after webinar and doing all of these things, where ultimately I think it was, had, kind of maybe the opposite intended effect of just, still at the end of the day, just, anytime I would peek at the news or take a look at, social media, it would immediately like send me down this spiral of like, okay, you know, um, but I think it was just a unique gift of time again, where I tried to, again, what can I control in this situation? Clearly, I can't control if countries aren't letting people
That's
travel, or
right.
planes aren't flying, or I can't go visit clients face to face. So I can't control any of that. Like, what can I control? I can definitely control my product knowledge, my, destination, I mean, all of these things. And that's really what I try to do. Plus, on top of just still being relatively new on the advisor side and having my own brand
Mhm.
and dealing with, trying to get my website and my marketing and my social and just kind of getting all that content there too, which as a small business owner, it definitely could get a little bit overwhelming when you're busy. So when I had more time, I tried to just focus on that more.
The the gift and the curse of the entrepreneur, right? I got to get it done. Action, 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 action. And at a certain point you go, "Oh, I've gone too far. I've gone
Yes.
too far. I'm too busy." And I want to balance things out, right? So, a lot of entrepreneurs that I know and that I've worked with, they go hard and they go, "Yeah, you know what? I'll go hard for, 10 months out of the year, but I'm gone for 2."
Right.
Like,
Well, that was what I was going to add to it. So then thankfully I had the grace of just saying, you know what? I got to a point where it was too much and it wasn't bringing joy into my life. And
mhm,
there wasn't any end in sight to what was going on with travel globally. And so again, I'm very grateful for my partner and his understanding. And it was basically just him saying, take a step back, do what makes you happy. If
mhm,
it's hiking with your dogs, if it's running, if it's rock climbing, all these things that we like to do, like you have no control over the situation. And if your current, strategy is not making you happy, like take a step back. And again, I guess this kind of returns to my point earlier about perspective is that I then had the opportunity to take a few trips, and it kind of reminded me like why I love what I do, that
mhm.
there is a way to travel safely right now. And just, and then taking a step back from my day to day routine and just that perspective and reigniting that fire because I was also running into, a period where I wasn't feeling happy. I wasn't feeling
Mhm,
happy even trying to promote travel, to talk about travel, to talk about anything. And again, that comes across to people. If you're not feeling that,
mhm.
you're not going to be able to sell anybody on it. So just taking that brief step back kind of helped me to realign my focus and remind myself this is why I do what I do. And it's definitely worth continuing.
A lot of people forget. So, another lesson is okay, so business is down. So instead of working in the business, we work on the business. And that's how you kind of, a lot of people say, oh, we need to slow down. Well, we don't slow down. We just change the focus, right? So instead of focusing hard on in the business and you being a salesperson, it's all about behaviors. How many phone calls do I have to make? How many interviews do I have to make? How many meetings? How do I move my prospects from being cold to B's to A's to A pluses? And it's about moving the needle in sales. So now you've got somebody who's good at sales who needs to have a process, and now you're like, okay, what do I do now? I can't sell. What do I do? Right?
Where's
um
my pipeline?
that's right. So and you said a magical word that I emphasize. So in continuous improvement and lean management, a lot of people do plan, do track, adjust. I've added a fifth one. Having worked in Japan on Kaizen and lean management and all, there's one thing that you said that a lot of people forget. It's now some people include it in the planning phase, but I really kind of split it out where I put the R in front for research.
Mhm.
Right? You say, oh, let's plan a journey. Well, before you plan anything, we usually do the research. Unless you say, okay, research is part of the planning, I'm okay with it.
Okay.
But to a lot of people forget that research is a key component to saying, hey, let me rethink where I'm going here. Okay, so I was going this way. Now I've got to readjust because I can't do this on a day-to-day basis. Let's research and figure out where I want to go now. So it's not just plan, do, track, adjust, but you need to add the R in the front for research. So I think that's really really good. So what are you doing now to stay? Let's use the third word here, focus. So you said maintain positive, and now let's focus on focus.
Well, it's interesting. Kaizen is something that I subscribe to. And I should have put the two and two that you were in Japan, so but that's definitely something that I try to live my life by. But I think right now it's just in the travel industry, there's a lot of pent up demand for people that haven't been able to travel for very many reasons. Yeah.
Me, for those who are just listening to the podcast,
Yeah.
I am pointing the finger. I respect the rules, but for a guy who's a social
Obviously
butterfly,
the vaccine for so many people is, that will definitely help open borders. It's just getting, globally again with the testing and just a more kind of coordinated effort on travel globally and what that looks like. What are the requirements? It's, I tell people right now there is a way to travel if it's in your comfort level, but you can't be a type A traveler right now because everything is changing.
what's a
There's
type A traveler?
plan to the minute,
Oh,
the
okay.
second, very no, very rigid, no flexibility in schedule, and
Very
just
touristy, right? Very touristy. Like get on the bus, get off here, get off there. What I would
yeah, or
call it.
just check. Like
Gotcha.
I need to go to Rome, and here's the 50 places that I need to see in a day,
Gotcha.
kind of thing. So it's managing that expectation of what the experience is like now for places that are open, because just because they're open doesn't mean that they're delivering the same experience that you had last year. There's
Hmm.
obviously the industry that's been so hard hit where people have had to find other jobs. So,
Hmm.
it's there's that, there's just the reality of how quickly things are changing in relation to the pandemic and borders being open, what the testing requirements are. Um, but there is a way to do it. And I think just the education and the opportunity there. And so again, we have people that have been have been stuck at home for the last year. And then with the vaccine, and then just, us being further along in our understanding of what's going on with this, coupled with, how global tourism is trying to have this more, again,
Hmm.
um, coordinated effort. I think there's a lot of upside. So even just this year, even the last 2 to 3 weeks, I've had more new inquiries for
Oh,
business than
good.
I've had the last 6 months, which, some of it is just people are interested. They want to see, who knows what it's going to turn out to. But I think just it's all about that positive energy. For me, that's just, and if you're in sales, you got to have multiple balls in the air, if you will, because they're not all going to materialize, or they're on different schedule than you are. And so you just but just having that energy out there, I think, is kind of a catalyst for more energy to come. So there's definitely a lot of positive.
Okay.
You know.
So now you've had to readjust. Now tell me, how do you keep that maintain that positive focus on brand? So you've kind of, I don't know if you've had to, I wouldn't say rebrand, but I guess the industry has changed. So you keep your brand, but you have to offer a different service offering, I guess. So how have you dealt with that? Did you do like, did you rethink? Did you look at data? Did you like, how are you going to tackle 2021? I guess is
Yeah.
the question.
I mean, I think it's being in a position where, the travel industry certainly, has taken, again, a very hard hit. And I think people that were in this for the wrong reasons have long since bailed, because
Ah,
being a travel advisor the last year, I tell people it's broken my heart, 1,000 different ways. And
mhm,
that's not exaggeration, but I still, at the end of the day, like, want to keep moving forward, because I know it's going to come back. When it's going to come back, and again, it's that unknown, it's that area of uncomfortableness that, as an
mhm,
entrepreneur, as a travel advisor, you have to be okay with. So people that were probably in it for the wrong reasons have long since bailed. Older advisors that have wanted to retire for many years are probably saying, you know what, after 2020, I'm going to take a step back and actually retire. So there's that, area of potential business, if you will, that I think is going to create some opportunities. And then certainly just the general public at large that maybe has never worked with a travel advisor or doesn't quite understand the scope of services that you provide, but were certainly burned by not being able to get back their money, or being stuck
mhm,
somewhere, or not understanding, can I travel, and what does that look like, and what are the regulations, and what's going to be open, and do I need insurance, and so I think it's just this kind of perfect storm of more demand because people are understanding the value of travel advisors and what travel advisors do,
Mhm.
And then just this pent up demand for people for travel. People haven't been able to have their anniversary trips, have their honeymoons, connect with their loved ones. I mean, even just things that we took for granted, as simple as, I come from a very big family. I'm one of 8 children. So I'm used to, I fly to Texas to see my sister. I fly to
Mhm.
California to see my sister. I don't think anything of it. And so even just those simple, like being in the travel field, like travel advisors don't just do huge trips to Europe.
Mhm.
We do everything. So I think it's just also this understanding of, I do want to go visit my brother in Colorado, but what are the local restrictions there? Do I have to, what kind of testing? What are the flights? What's that experience going to be like?
Oh, that's good. That's good. So you're liberating them. You're taking that ease away from him. So when you think, okay, I got direction, what am I eliminating for them? Okay, all the planning, all the doubts that they have. So you're eliminating all of that. You're automating the process and therefore liberating their time. So well worth its money when you think all of that. So that's how, wow, that's a good thing. I think that 2021 will be good for you because now there's more doubt around, I shouldn't say doubt. There's more considerations, I guess, to be taken before traveling. Do you think that it's going to impact? Now, I know that before people would travel just to travel, right? Do you think that there's going to be more in now this age of Aquarius? Is there going to be more people who are fundamentally eager to go to different places and slow down? Or do you think that it's just going to go rampant and get back to where it was back in 2019?
No, I mean, I think a phrase that I've heard is called conscious comeback.
Oh,
Certainly,
yeah.
certainly prior to COVID, there was definitely areas of the world that were struggling with over tourism. Venice being
Hmm.
a prime example, where hardly anybody went to Venice and spent the night. It was the day people that were there for a few hours, and just the impact that it had on the culture, on the local economy, on,
Hmm.
just so it's, again, we've all had to pause, and there's a lot of, talk about how do we come back and how do we, globally, yes, we've also now seen the effect of under tourism.
Hmm.
There's places in the world where, because you're not traveling there, and travel's not just, a hotel, an airline, it's the
Oh,
local
yeah.
guide, it's the taxi driver, it's the restaurant, it's the lady.
Mayan Riviera. Mayan Riviera. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's
what?
the
It's
artisan
80%.
making,
Yeah.
yeah, all of those are so impacted by, travel not happening. So it's how do we, so now we've seen under tourism where, because they don't have guests, they're having to either utilize their resources to make money, or you're seeing, like in places like Africa where the poaching was resumed, things like that, where
Hmm.
because money from tourist dollars wasn't coming in, they had to, obviously figure out a way to survive.
Hmm.
So I think, again, it's just that balance that this, that we've all kind of like had to have this paradigm shift, if you will, of, okay, we've seen the effects of too much tourism, we've seen the effects of not enough, and there's definitely, certainly, on as an advisor, some of the onus is on you, is when you get somebody that wants to travel to, say, Italy, which rightfully so is an amazing place to travel to, the food, the culture, the
Hmm.
genuine, hospitality. But instead of, if you have somebody who's open to it, instead of, ticking off the certain places that are on everybody's, bucket list, maybe recommending the second and third tier cities that aren't as well known, but certainly still deliver on, the experience and whatever that, is to that particular person. So some of it is just in making different recommendations, but also just, in general, being more aware of
Yeah.
too much and too little, and what's your role in that, and how do you kind of help modify or help to monitor that.
You know what? I just thought about something else for you. Now that we've got Zoom, that decentralized workforce, right? Everybody's okay with working from home now. I mean, I've been doing it for years with traveling and working around the world, but now people are realizing that, wow, I don't have to have 100 people office in downtown Dallas. I don't need to have that high real estate in New York City, right? They're saying, well, okay, so maybe I can go live in Costa Rica and do my job.
Right.
Maybe I can go live in Italy for 6 months.
Yep.
Right. So I guess that's another thing that I would, you know what? now that I think about it, CEOs that are listening, you want to go live somewhere else, or your staff want to go, because I mean, Mandy could do that. When I'm thinking about it, you can prepare, plan, do all of that for people who want to have an extended stay and say, hey, you know what? I want to work from Costa Rica for the next 6 months.
Oh yeah,
Right?
without question. I mean, the explosion in growth this year of work from home destinations, especially with kids, in
Hmm.
online school, we've definitely had a lot of interest, a lot of people that are, traveling to places and they're staying for 2 to 3 months, in villas, in private homes. Obviously people are very mindful of, they want a space to roam. They want to be in their own,
Hmm.
area, their own bubble, if you will. So private villas, private homes in, Costa Rica comes to mind, Belize,
Southern Spain. I
Mexico.
can't tell all my secrets. We go, my family and I, for many years, we go for 3 weeks from, December 20th around there. I'd keep on working, but we'd work from Cabo. So we'd go over Cabo, rent a house there, and work from there. But I'm definitely gonna. So Mandy's gonna be on my list of people to call back and figure out how can I get my kids. I think the more I think about it, Europe has been, they have their issues, but their lifestyle, their way of living is completely different than North America.
Yeah.
Haven't lived it, so that's a good one. So tell me, so 2021 pipeline, kind of a spin on this, where you're going. Do you have positive outlook? Do you think that you might not be able to get the same numbers, but you definitely be able to create some consistency within your revenue that you've pivoted and
Absolutely. Without a doubt, definitely more positive than, at this juncture in January than I was all of last year. It's still going to be fairly tame, if you will,
Mhm.
Caribbean, Mexico, domestically here in the United States. Hopefully Canada wants us back sometime. um,
You guys sort your stuff out down there, then you guys can come up.
yeah. Uh, so it's still going to be, fairly close to home, if you will, coming domestically from the United States. But again, I think a lot of it is just where our knowledge of what's going on and
Mhm.
how, how we collectively responded to it. So I think Europe, hopefully second half of 2021 will be open. Certainly a return to cruising, that's something that,
Oh
my
yeah,
client and I'm very, have been monitoring, just because have been the cruise industry has definitely been a little unfairly
it's
maligned
been
as far as.
sinking. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you think about an industry that from day one was required to have 100% testing. There's no other sect of our society or any other industry that's had that from the get-go. So obviously, been a little unfairly maligned, if you will. But obviously, there's CDC here in the United States. They have a return to sail. All these guidelines and all these requirements that they're required to have. So I think it's just, once that comes back again, when you talk about that trickle down approach, where there's so many, like if you look at Alaska, for example, there's so many
Mhm.
port cities there that are completely dependent on it, because you can't really get there as easily, by air, by car. Some places you can't get there other than by boat. So just again, that talk about that conscious comeback of, once cruising does return, how do we also then trickle that down to the local economies where
Mhm.
they're not completely overwhelmed? The experience isn't, it's not going to be what it was the last few years. I don't see that happening, if it ever happens. Again, I
Yeah.
think this is completely changed how travel will happen. But there's a lot of reasons to be positive. So
Yeah, I could have used your business cards a few years back when I was traveling from Dallas to Vancouver. I'd always sit beside a couple that was landing in Vancouver to take a cruise up to the Alaskas. And I was like, they say, "Oh, you live here?" And I go, "Yes, this is where." And then they get out at the airport. And our airport is very pretty. If you've ever been to Vancouver, the airport it is very nice. And everybody would stop and look. And I was like, "Get out of my way. I just want to get home. I've been away from home for 2 weeks." So Mandy, um, what's the one book, one reference material? What's the one thing that you've been looking at or reading that puts a twinkle in your eye, that makes you happy? What's really igniting your curiosity lately?
Well, obviously any kind of travel magazine.
Business wise, are you looking, because you said Kaizen or something like that? Is there a
Yeah.
book that you've been looking at improving your business on, or anything like that?
I, no, I mean,
No.
I like books for me. It's sometimes I'm
Oh, it
not.
could be anything else. It could be what you're looking at, you're studying. What are you looking at right now, for improving your business or making your business any better? Is there any types of, because I know you did it, you said a lot of seminars. So what are the latest kind of?
Um, well, actually, like one of the things that I have been focused on the last year is just being here in Tucson, and it's just to focus on the local community. And actually, today there's a publication here in the United States called the Scout Guide
Okay.
that's all about. So Scout Guide is the overarching kind of parent company, if you will, and then they have all these different cities that have their own guides. So in Tucson, it's basically everything about local businesses, and
Mhm.
more bespoke. You know, there's a certain kind of thread that runs through everything, but it's just all about promoting small and local and shop local and the benefit overall. And I think, again, when you talk about, for me in sales, it's always about people buy from who they know, like, and trust, especially
Mhm.
when they're selling a service and it's not necessarily like a tangible product. And then so much of my business is referrals. Once you get that
Yeah.
initial client who's happy, tells their friends, and then it snowballs from there. But so I had really focused on just how can I kind of ingrain myself in the local community. I mean, both of
Mhm.
my parents grew up in Tucson. I'm a native Arizonan. So I kind of understand a little bit of that. There's that wild, wild West mentality here, but Tucson especially is. I always say it's a town that has a soul, and that's one of the things I love about living here. Is we've got incredible natural beauty all around us,
Mhm.
like every kind of outdoor activity you can think of. It's a small town in terms of. I don't ever feel overwhelmed here,
Mhm.
but it also has a really cool culture because there's this mix of Spanish, obviously Mexico is, an hour.
Southwest, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's all these different influences and it's a very artsy kind of, vibe. But you have to want it to find it is what I always tell people.
Yeah.
Coming from DC, certainly my experience was culture on every level was easy to find from
Mhm.
free to all the way up to the Kennedy Center. Whereas here, Tucson's much more spread out. So you really have to kind of like ingrain yourself in that. So I had just was trying to find a way to become more involved in the community and just promoting the destination. And I think that's kind of been something that, with not being able to get in front of people like I normally could, but then now I have this network of other like-minded small businesses who go on referrals or in sales or that kind of thing. So it's kind of just expanded
Mhm.
upon it's like my expanding on my sales force, if you will.
I people tend to forget, right? Travel. The one thing that we've learned over, because we live in British Columbia, and everybody around the world travels to us to come and visit us and say how beautiful we are as well. Because we're the opposites. We're uh, a rainforest where you guys are a desert, and kind of similar mindsets.
Mhm.
Uh, you don't have to get on a plane to travel, and that's what a lot of people, I think, what you've mentioned about connecting with people, being curious, taking the time to talk to people. Those are the human connections that we should not lose, uh, either you're traveling or in the business. And I think it's time that, I think if we have something to learn from maintaining positive focus through COVID, is that humans are important to all of us. And one, all for one and all for one, the three musketeers that have said this. I think that we have to unite in this, and reach out and find the purpose of having to do travel. So Mandy, how can people get a hold of you? Because I think there's a lot of stuff in here that CEOs, venture capitalists, business owners can learn from you, contact you, and you can help them as well. So where can people get a hold of you?
I'm on Instagram, Facebook under Creosote Journeys. And then I have obviously my website, Creosote Journeys, and I'll let you phonetically spell that out for them so they
Oh,
can.
damn it. No. I for those it will be in the notes. Damn it. And I was like,
Put it in the show notes.
I know I am. So for those who are listening, who don't know me, I am dyslexic. So hence why there is no book, but there is a podcast. Okay. And then lastly, what can you do for people? Like what's in it for the listener? Why would they come and see you?
I think if there's anything that, again, the inability to reunite with people you love, travel, the last 8 months that has taught us, I think there's just nothing that replaces that connection with another human being. And I think, it transcends simply moving from point A to point B. It's about that feeling that you have, that memory that you have even years from now, and just that joy that it brings. And I think that for me, that's my singular focus, is helping people to create those experiences so that it can bring joy into their lives.
Fabulous. Thank you, Mandy. Mandy McKaskle. I will give it my best shot again. So Creosote. Damn it. You know what? Go say it again. Say it again for me.
Creosote Journeys.
Creosote Journeys. Creosote Journeys. Creosote Journeys. Say it 3 times, okay? Give a shout out to Mandy. She'll help you with travel plans, relocating staff, or if you want to relocate, you want to go spend some time, give her a shout. I'm sure she'll help us out. Thank you very much, Mandy. It's been a joy to have you on the show. I just saw one of your pooches just kind of stick their nose up in the camera there. Mine is still sleeping over there. So
thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. It's Martin Hunter, your host for What CEOs Talk About, where we translate strategies into frontline operations. Thank you very much.
Thanks for tuning in to What CEOs Talk About. Make sure to click subscribe to get notified about future episodes, or check us out at www.whatceostalkabout.com.